but that's probably where the depression really started to build for me. And I started drinking more and more just to numb feelings. And then 2016, this crash, like I think that was a deal breaker for me. I was just done. Things continued to stack up on me. I drank and drank and drank for about 2 years. In 2018, I ended up, it's funny, I worked 24-hour shifts one day on, 2 days off. I would, my drinking got so bad that I would tell my wife I was going to pick up an overtime shift so that I could disappear for 24 hours. And then I would check into a hotel up by the interstate and just drink and be sad and be depressed. And on December 1st, 2018, I checked into that hotel with no intention of checking out.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Trauma Uncensored. I'm your host, Brooke Shearer. We've got another great episode for you today, which we will jump into shortly. If you're a regular listener of this podcast, thank you for your continued support. And if this is your first time listening, I'm so glad you found us. This podcast was created as a safe space for community, connection, resources, and support for anyone navigating trauma, grief, mental health, or pain. Here, your experiences are both valid and valued. Your story matters, and it's important to know you are not walking this path alone. It is my hope that each episode helps you feel more connected and reminds you that it is possible to not only live, but to truly thrive after hardship. Trauma Uncensored began as an extension of my own healing journey following immense trauma. The course of my life changed in the fall of 2015 and led to the tragic death of our 9-year-old son, Logan, in 2016 due to a distracted driver whose reckless choice behind the wheel led to the crash. In the time since Logan was taken from us, I have fought for my mental health and for my survival. That fight has led me down an unexpected path of discovery, healing, and recovery. It has given me the tools to sit here today and share these conversations with you. If you're new to the Trauma Uncensored podcast, I invite you to start with episode 1 titled The Crash. In that episode, I share the beginning of my story, which provides important context for the conversations and guest stories that follow. Speaking of guests, we believe our listeners' voices matter deeply, and we welcome those who wish to share their experiences. If interested, click on the submission link in our show notes below, email hello@traumauncensored.com, or reach out through any of our social platforms. Just be sure to include the word guest in your submission. All show information, resources, and links can also be found in the show notes. Be sure to follow us on our social media platforms and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. And if this podcast speaks to you, and I'm sure it will, we would truly appreciate you leaving a review. Before we begin, a quick and important disclaimer. This podcast discusses topics related to grief, loss, trauma, mental health challenges, survival, and more. While I have gained deep personal experience in these areas, I am not a therapist, and this show is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. So stay tuned for another installment of Trauma Uncensored, where, as always, we're healing out loud.
Trauma Uncensored.
Trauma Uncensored.
Trauma Uncensored.
I'm super excited to have you on today, John. I am humbled and grateful, and I mean, there's so many adjectives that could be listed in having you in our lives. For those of you who are just joining us, I'm welcoming today a friend of mine. His name is John Kinzie. And John and I actually met in a very tragic way. John was a first responder on the scene the day of our crash. And John has since become a dear family friend. John and I talk regularly. He's got one hell of a story to tell. And the story is so important because I can speak on my end what the crash did for myself and for our family, the events of that day. But I also know John's story, and John's story is similar in trauma, but very different in outcome. And I think it's very important to, not only discuss his experiences there, but also being a paramedic, because I can't, I never thought of it before, John, about how, paramedics, you know, walk alongside what they see. I mean, my father was a police officer for many years, and I never thought about the trauma that he experienced ever. And it wasn't until, Logan's death after that crash that I really began to understand the ripple effect that it had throughout the community. I mean, talking with you, and I know the 911 operator had to go through trauma therapy. And I mean, we've spoken to so many people who it affected, from people in the crash to people who witnessed the crash, and, the doctors and all of that. So I'm very excited. I'm very excited to share. But before we get started, I do want to run over a little bit of information about John so everybody gets to know who he is before he starts telling you about his experiences. John has 25 years of service as a firefighter paramedic for Hernando County Fire Rescue in Florida. He is currently serving as a founding partner in Hernando County's Community Paramedic Program, where the primary focus is helping those with substance use and behavioral health issues. He is also an active member of the department's peer support team, PEER support team, helping those members navigate the stress and trauma associated with the job. John is a grateful alcoholic with 7 years of sobriety as a result of 12-step recovery. And I'm going to put this in there before I read your last bullet point. Notice 7 years of sobriety, and Logan passed away over 9 years ago. So y'all can do the math there. Most importantly to John, or I'm sorry, most importantly to me, John was on the scene the day of our crash and was the paramedic who worked to save Logan's life. I'm so very grateful for this man and for our continued friendship since. I'm so honored to have him here with us today as he shares his own story of September 15th, 2016, and the journey that would come after for him. So I'm going to do my best not to do a lot of ugly cry. This is going to be, I think, very powerful for both of us. I'm known to do the ugly cry, from time to time. Um, but I feel like I'm in very good company and that we can share the emotion together. So I'm so excited to have you here. I am curious. Um, you, I can only imagine the toll your job, the toll Logan's death has taken on you. I also know the extremely hard work you've done since to find healing across the board. I'm curious if you could talk to us about your paramedic experiences, um, about how you handle all of that, the programs that you're involved in. But I was hoping you could start by taking us back to the day of the crash. And, people have heard what it was like through our eyes, my eyes, Jordan's, even Mallory's. But what was it like through your eyes?
Well, for starters, thanks for having me.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
it made me want to cry saying all those nice things about me.
Oh,
But on that particular day, it's funny. There are a lot of things I do remember and a lot of things that I don't remember. Um, but you guys, I think, you were stacking up in traffic because of a previous accident. We
correct.
we had just been out to that accident, and it wasn't any significant trouble or damage, no patients. So we had come back off the interstate. We were almost back to the station, and we got toned out for another accident, same location. And so initially we're eye rolling, thinking another passerby just called in the same accident. But then we got a report that CPR was in progress from a bystander on a child, and my heart just sank. So my blood's pumping and I'm ready to go. And as we make our way through the traffic to get to you, I hop out and grab our monitor and a bag of gear. I'm tall. I'm 6'2". So with all this stuff, it was a little top heavy. It had been raining like it typically does here in Florida, the afternoon thunderstorm, which made the roads a little slick. And I was so anxious to get out and render care that I kind of jumped out before the engine had actually set the parking brake. And because of the sirens, vehicles were still trying to get out of our way. And a lady ran into me with her car,
Oh,
knocked
I
me down,
remember that. That's right.
But I just quickly gathered everything up and made my way to Logan. And if I recall, I took over. I set the gear down. I took over the compressions. My partner came up behind me and put them on the monitor. And despite having 24 years with the county, I had only been working as a paramedic for a short time. I'd been doing the job for a long time, but I was going through getting cleared to act as an independent medic. So my partner, Mike, was with me, and Mike he looked at the monitor and gave me the head shake. And I think I looked to you and said, "I'm sorry." And that, at that point, I'm in job mode, and I know there's multiple patients in this accident. And I know we've always been taught that you have to quickly triage and move on. If there's someone you can't help, then you need to get with someone you can help. So at that moment, I kind of kept moving. I think we had 2 or 3 helicopters come in for that. You were ground transported.
I was. Yep.
But it was after we got the patients off the scene. I just remember sitting on the front of the engine and I cried. And that's probably the first time I've ever cried on a call. So that particular call was kind of life changing for me. And it really, that was, I'd seen some infant pediatric fatalities a couple of times in my career, but none of them ever sat with me like this one did, and still does.
I'm curious about that. Have you been able to uncover the specific reason that this one was as powerful as it was?
I think it's a combination of things. So this might be where we get into my backstory a little bit. And first responders, and your dad would probably tell you this, that we're always kind of taught that you don't talk about those things after the call, that you just suck it up. It comes with the job and you move on. Leading up to that, I had some significant things going on in my life. Looking back, I can tell you I was an alcoholic early on. Never felt comfortable around other people, always felt different than, until as a teenager, I started drinking, and alcohol for me made me at ease around other people. Social lubrication, I guess you would say.
Mm-hmm.
But it also became the way that I dealt with and coped with everything. A couple of years before the accident, I lost my mom, and that was really, really, I had a hard time getting past that. That's probably where the depression really started to build for me. And I started drinking more and more just to numb feelings. Um, that was 2012. 2013, I lost, this is going to sound silly to some folks, but I had an American bulldog, Abby. She was beautiful, and she was best companion I'd ever had at that time. And I just loved her so much. And she was, I'd have a shit day at work and come home, and she was my comfort, my companion, my peace. And I had to put her down. And that was difficult, and that kind of stacked up. And then 2016, this crash, like I think that was that was a deal breaker for me. I was just done.
As the tipping point. Your nervous system had all it could tolerate.
And we had available to us, we had employee assistance.
Mm.
And I tried that on several occasions, but I never made a connection with the counselors. I always felt like they were reading from a script and it just, there was never a connection. There was never a resolution to what I was feeling and what I was dealing with. So after the crash, things continued to stack up on me. I drank and drank and drank for about 2 years. In 2018, I ended up. It's funny. I worked 24-hour shifts, one day on, 2 days off. I would. My drinking got so bad that I would tell my wife I was going to pick up an overtime shift so that I could disappear for 24 hours. And then I would check into a hotel up by the interstate and just drink and be sad and be depressed. And on December 1st, 2018, I checked into that hotel with no intention of checking out.
Wow.
And whenever it came down to it, I couldn't follow through. And one of the biggest reasons was it occurred to me that my crew would have to run the call whenever I did that. And I didn't want to do that to them. And I just, at that point, I kind of lost it. I had a good cry and a good talk with God. And the next morning I looked up 12-step meetings. We talked about this. I won't fellowship by name. But, and there was one 2 miles from my house. And I wandered in there, and those people loved me whenever I couldn't love myself. And it took a lot of time, but I learned to love myself. I learned to work through these things that I'd been carrying for so long. And it changed my life. And one of the biggest things that I've learned in the 12-step fellowship is when you're all in yourself feeling sorry and pitiful and sad and depressed, one of the best things you can do is try and do something for someone else. And as silly as it sounds, for me, that has worked beautifully.
It is not silly. It is, I don't know that I've come across very many people who have found themselves in really dark situations that haven't found healing through, finding some way of helping others. I mean, um, none, and of course, not everybody does that. And I remember people telling me that from the get go. After losing Logan, the best way to heal is to do something for other people or is to find, purpose. And I know for us, we did it too soon, right? Ours was too soon, and that led to some really bad experiences for me later. And after this journey, I've known for a long time that I've wanted to help people. I'm very, very passionate about creating trauma awareness, as everybody who listens knows. I mean, this is just this means so much to me. And because I've done the work that I've done, um, I feel like I'm in a good place foundationally where it won't send me, into a dark hole like it did before. So tell me, when that idea started to kind of morph, and I definitely want you to tell us about what, you do to help people. What was the process in coming to that realization and actually acting on it? Did you, spend some time in your program healing, or did you jump right into it?
I spent some time getting my feet under me, learning how the program works. Um, that was 2018 when I got sober. COVID came through
Oh yeah.
2020, and course, everyone panicked and started shutting down AA meetings and 12-step meetings.
Mhm.
um, and so they closed down the meeting place where my group was meeting, and it was that was very concerning for a lot of people who rely on the fellowships of these meetings to maintain their sobriety. And I've always been a bit of a techie, and I said, we can do this on Zoom. And in that fellowship, service is a big part of it. You're always looking for ways to be of service, chairing the meeting, coming in, making the coffee, cleaning up afterwards, working with newcomers as they come in. Well, that was my first act of service. Is I had a skill that enabled me to set up our Zoom meetings, and we met on one guy's back porch, those of us who weren't afraid to come together. And we had a big screen TV and a camera, and we could Zoom with the people who wanted to log in virtually. And we did that for almost a year and a half until we found a place that would let us start meeting in person again. That was my first, like I said, that was my introduction to service. Um, and then because of that, people are, they're desperate. They're looking for meetings, and information was hard to get out. And the county had a website that would list where these meetings were, but they did not have anyone maintaining that website. And I had spent some time dabbling in web design, and I said, I'll do it.
Mm.
And I took on the website just so I could get our meeting information out there, but then began doing it for all the other groups that were still managing to meet. And so that took me into service on a county level, and it just grew from there. And I've continued to manage technology for the county for this 12-step fellowship. And I just love it. Another thing was, we talked about the stigma for first responders, that that they're not comfortable talking about these things. And so I I felt very strongly that this needed to change. And I guess a few other people in my department did too, because they started throwing around the idea of putting together a peer support team. Um, and they said, anyone interested, please submit. I immediately sent them my information. Well, at that time, I was John the alcoholic,
Mm.
fresh into recovery. No, we don't, and so for the first year, they didn't select me to be on the team. But I continued to work with people when I could, when I saw an opportunity. And about a year later or so, they asked if I would like to come join the team, and I did, and I've been a part of it since. And I've learned a lot from it. And again, just trying to reduce that stigma. There's just, in my opinion, too much stigma out there that keeps people from getting the help they need.
Can you speak more into that about the stigma? So I mean, most people will understand on maybe a general level what those stigmas are, but can you help us understand what some of the finite details into that stigma pertains? I mean, what are some of those? I mean, because there's a stigma for pretty much everything, right? For, any sort of mental health but I don't know honestly that me personally, I've never heard of there being a stigma for paramedics, for I mean, my friend Carolyn, which I'm considering, I think I want to have a panel with you and her because she's a paramedic in Indianapolis. In fact, I have to say hello to Carolyn, and I have to point out the Buc-ee's cup that she brought me the last time she came down here. This is its introduction onto the show. She will be very happy. But Carolyn comes down to Tennessee and spends a lot of time with me and tells me a lot of her stories. And, you know, having her and having you in my life has been so humbling in terms of being able to understand and value and be grateful for people who are of service for humans, right? So when you say stigma, it's hard for me to, I mean, I know that there's a stigma with police officers, right? I mean, I heard everything from my father and then you hear everything on TV and whatever. But for first responders, can you explain more on or say more about that?
I I think there was a time where fire and EMS were separate.
Mhm.
About 10 years ago, there was a trend towards combining the two. So your firefighters were also paramedic. Um, and it cut down on labor and because there weren't that many fires. So we're paying the fire department to sit around. So
Sure.
long story short, I think it comes in the fire service from firefighter mentality. Throw some dirt on it, you'll be fine. We don't have feelings. Tough it up. We're
Mm.
men. And it's just taken a long time to tear that down. Now, I can tell you that lately I've worked a little bit with the sheriff's department here. They wanted to put together a peer support team. So we've been working closely with them to let them know how we got ours started. Um, and you're right. The perspective there is that if you have this problem with something you've seen, then you're no longer fit for duty to carry
Mhm.
a gun and that's got to change. I've got a friend who used to work for the sheriff's department. He was first on scene for a family pit bull mauling
Ugh.
an infant. Okay. Um, those images are hard to sit with and hard to get out of your head, but they did not have, there was nothing in place to help him deal with that. And he eventually ended up in a confrontation with law enforcement, and Baker acted, and it lost his job. And it's funny now, he has recovered, and now he's working with other cops who have been through similar things and with veterans, and he's very active and he does a lot of good to help people. But think if those resources had been available to him when
Mhm.
that happened, the management notices, okay, this is a high impact call. Let's do a critical incident stress debriefing and see if there's a need for further, you know, work in this case to get him the help that he needs. Had that been available, it never would have gotten to the point where he ended up in a standoff with his own department because he was
Sure.
suicidal over not being able to sit with the things he had witnessed.
And it's so interesting. I was actually just having this conversation um the other day with someone. I don't remember exactly how it came to, but I think that is a trickle down effect from society, honestly, because I tell people all the time, you know, Jordan and I never heard the word trauma after Logan's death until, I mean, basically, I mean, we'd heard it, right? But nobody, and we were in therapy and we were in counseling and we were doing all the things. And nobody had ever sat down with us and been like, you have this trauma and this is, what it's doing. And this is how to work on it until he went to residential trauma in 2022, and then I went after him, and that was where our trauma journey, our understanding of that trauma began. But you know, even before Logan died, the incident that led up to Logan's death, which I detail, I think it's episode 14, the Richard episode. Someday maybe I'll disclose his real name, but um I spent, almost a year battling what had happened and watching my son, just suffer from this situation. And I can look back now and say that was the straw that broke the camel's back for me in terms of my trauma. Like it was a perfect storm of my job and all of these other things. And that was so traumatic on our family, and for me to watch my son suffer the way he suffered,
Yeah.
nobody ever I upped my counseling, right? I upped my counseling. I was going in, and nobody, not one person said the word trauma for myself or for Logan. Like that triggered his ADHD, I mean, overnight. And we never realized that's what happened. Just all of a sudden he was having a hard time in school. And um, so nobody's talking about that. So I'm curious if it's actually, like a ripple effect down from the top, right? Society. And then, um, plus you're I mean, the generations, right? The generations of being in positions like you are, and just to suck it up. And, nobody wants to deal with that shit. Nobody wants to deal with it. And I'm glad to hear that, there's something happening
I
on
can
your end.
I can say I've seen growth in our department. Um, there are guys who are on the peer support team now that I'm really happy they're a part of the team, but I can remember a time when maybe they would have scoffed at the idea.
Really.
It's changing, and it's changing to the point now where they give us an opportunity every time we have a recruit class come through to sit down with the recruits before they ever hit the front line and let them know that this is going to happen. You're going to have a hard time with some things, and you don't need to sit on it. You need to talk about it. You need to work through it. And we have the resources. And if we don't, we'll find them for you.
What kind of resources do you have to offer?
I'm so glad you asked.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad the question came to my mind.
So we have one local place in Hernando County where behavioral emergencies would go. And as you can imagine, as first responders, we're in and out of that facility taking patients in and
Mhm.
out.
Mhm.
So they know who we are. And we had an employee who was in crisis and got taken to that facility. And can you imagine
Mm. Mhm.
the embarrassment for him? So at that point, we realized, okay, we got to get a plan in place. And we worked with Baycare, which is they're all over the Florida, Tampa Bay area, all the way up into Hernando County. But we negotiated with them. They said, we'll provide the care for you. And we have a plan in place now where if we have an employee in crisis, they go one or two counties over and they get a VIP stay where they're kept, you know, they're not with general pop. They'll be with other first responders or whatever. But there's then, that right there goes a long way in if I'm in crisis, I'm not going to ask for help because you're going to take me to the place up the street where they know me. They see me every
Mhm.
day, bringing patients in and out. The patients know me. I'm not going to ask for help. Now
Which
we have
is unfortunate because, I mean, that's again one of those stigmas that is just so unfortunate, because everybody deserves to be able to share their hardships without there being shame or guilt. That's what saddens me the most about this topic is the and it's not it's placed on us by ourselves through what we've learned by being shamed and guilted, and so that but it is very interesting to hear that um there is a place now where there are, I mean, the population of clientele are in, the fire or rescue teams, which has to create, I would think, a a fairly healthy community of people who are in there going through the similar experiences, being able to share similar stories.
it's a slow progress, but there has been progress,
Yeah,
and I think it'll continue to move in a positive direction.
that's good to hear. That's very good to hear. Are there other specific resources that you guys have been able to implement that, the department is starting to implement outside of that care?
Well, like I mentioned in discussing my friend's situation, now we look for certain calls. If there's a pediatric death, there's certain criteria that we look for. And instead of waiting for someone to go, I'm having a hard time with this, we pull that crew in within 48 hours for a critical incident stress debriefing to discuss a call. And we try and pull our dispatchers in for that because, as you know, they have a difficult role in there too.
Mhm.
And that has been great. People were resistant to participating initially, but the more we do it, the more benefit we see and the more willingness we see to do that process.
That sounds that sounds awesome. I mean, that to me is a very positive step in the right direction of, in terms of societal change as well, because that is something I don't know. I mean, do you know, are there other programs or departments that are doing the same thing either in Florida or regionally or even nationally?
It's progressing nationally. It's progressing. Certainly, we weren't the first, but also there are some departments in the area that do not yet have peer support teams. Um, the peer support team is it's not a there's no compensation for being on it, right? And it is separate from the department administration because if I'm struggling with something, I don't want to go to my battalion chief and alert him that I may, the stigma and hey, I may be having
Mhm.
trouble with this. I want a confidential person to talk to. So admin is out of the peer support team, but what they do pay for is some of the training between our union and administration. They cover the cost of the training so that we can learn how to help the guys through these difficult situations.
That's great.
And that's pretty cool.
Yeah, is there any sort of, you were talking about as new people are coming on, they're made aware of certain resources that are available or like protocols that are happening now. But are there any like trauma specific classes that are being offered, or is that something that's, a hope for the future?
It's a part of trauma is addressed in our critical incident stress debriefing training. But again, it's still kind of early. It's in its infancy, I would say, and progressing. And we're sorting out as we go how to adjust and make things better. Um, the sheriff's department initially, that we had said, hey, we've got this peer support team. You guys should do this for your guys. Nah, we're working on something, but we're good. And then they had someone who was in crisis and committed suicide
Mm,
and realize okay, and they reached back out to us, and then they were kind of willing. So unfortunately, it takes
yep.
sometimes it takes bad things to happen for you to realize the need for change.
Yep. I mean, look at what happened, with our trial, which John was there. I know John wanted to testify in our trial against Andriotis and was not asked to, right?
Did you and I talk about that?
Yeah, well, because I think we talked about it while it was going on, and then we saw you at the courthouse,
Yeah,
and I know you were hoping to. And in fact, I remember reaching out to the attorney and mentioning you wanting to. And the thing about it is,
I was
correct
too
me.
emotional in the
Yeah.
deposition.
Uh-huh. And that's the thing. I was going to say, correct me if I'm wrong, but um I believe that it was like you were mentioning, the emotion that kept it, which I find hard to, because everybody who did testify had to have had some sort of emotion, unless what they were really looking for honestly was the emotion from the family versus anyone. But how could you not? And the thing of it is that I think what upset me the most that you didn't get to testify was the fact that you didn't get to sit there and tell your story, tell your view, tell your perspective. I believe we talked about, or I don't know if Jordan was on the show for this one or if I was talking about column A back in one of the first episodes. And column A was what we came up with our therapist Austin before we went to trial. And right before we went to trial, the attorney had reached out to us, and Andriotis wanted to submit, or was submitting, a plea deal for a year, and I think it was a year probation, or maybe it was a year in jail and then so many years probation, or it was some asinine request. And we battled with that idea of, okay, well, if we took it, right, then we wouldn't have to actually go to trial and sit through all of that. But if we didn't take it, then we didn't know, what the could have been was. And my biggest argument through all of that was, we need to give the people who were involved in that crash that day a space to be able to tell their story, because they haven't had the opportunity to tell their story. Um, I know, and you didn't get to, which is, why, honestly, I'm so grateful that that you're here speaking to us now, because you can tell that story. But it was upsetting that you were not able to, because you were the one who worked on Logan.
Yeah, well, let me share this with you. Try and find some peace in this because I did. That deposition I sat through was very traumatic.
I'm sure.
They showed me pictures that I didn't need to see. And it was probably good for me that I didn't have to testify. And I've had the chance to tell the story. Every year, whenever I celebrate a sobriety date, it's customary that you speak at a meeting and tell about your experience. And I can tell you at least seven different times, Logan has been discussed by name in a meeting.
Yeah.
So I've had the chance to tell my story.
Uh,
I will continue to tell it to those who may benefit from the experience.
is there anything you'd like to tell everyone today? I would love for you to use this as a platform if you're open to it.
What I will say is, for the first responders, for the veterans, and for those out there who do other things, if you are struggling with behavioral health, if you are struggling with substance, please reach out for help. One of the things that I do now, and it's made, I think, a significant difference, is I just advocate for the people who come looking for help. I take the time to find the appropriate resource for them. Nobody else is willing to do that. And you get the addicts, the alcoholics call 911, in a moment of, that's not emergency.
Right.
They get taken to the ER, they sober up, and they're discharged. There's no long-term help there. I look for that long-term help, for that
Good.
solution. And if there's a willingness on their part, it usually goes very well.
Mm-hmm.
If there's not a willingness, then hopefully you planted a seed. Um,
I
but
understand that
I,
1000%.
and you can share my information in the comments. I don't care what state you're in. If you need a resource, look me up and I will do what I can to help you, because someone did it for me.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I know we've shared conversations. We've shared personal conversations about resources as well, which, has been
Joe.
that. I mean, and that's the true, I think that's the true beauty in community, is, and finding that healing and helping people, is being able to provide those type of resources. But it also comes from experience. It comes from experience. Like, I've mentioned on the show before, I voluntarily checked into a behavioral health center in Florida in the summer of 2016 when what I didn't realize then was that my nervous system had completely shut down. Like I went into straight into fawn mode. I was literally curled up in a ball, dissociative, all of these things, suicidal. And, went to the ER and was told, "Oh, this place will be great. You need a rest. It's 3 days. You'll get all of this therapy and you'll get these group sessions and this and this." And it was a glorified what you'd see on a movie. I mean, that's all it was. It was awful. So bad that within, the first day of me being there, Jordan was trying to get me out and I couldn't. They wouldn't let me. They wouldn't let me go. And so, through that experience, when I had a similar incident in 2020, 2019, the end of 2019 into 2020, Jordan was desperate to figure out what to do with me. And I was like, "You're not sending me back there." And I'm very fortunate now. I feel very grateful that I've had the experiences of that, because I will tell anyone, and it doesn't mean that it's right for every single person, because maybe a person needs a 3-day hold just to be watched. Maybe. But I've heard too many horror stories, of those experiences. But I'm grateful that I had it, because I can speak to that experience, and that I wouldn't personally recommend anybody doing something like that. And there are emerging programs. I've been through, 2 programs that were not 3-day stints, just babysitting, that have changed my life, right? And Jordan's been through 2, and, um, there's so much more out there than just falling back to that necessarily, which people reach out, and have asked for those resources. And I feel fortunate that I can help pass them, those, and, the ketamine treatments and the OCD programs and all of those things along. Um, so
Do you know if you guys have a NAMI chapter local to you, National Alliance of Mental Illness?
I don't, but I'm sure in Nashville there's got to be one. Yeah.
That's someone that I've worked closely with in this area, and they've been a great resource. They do a lot of peer and help you navigate finding the help that you need, and there's no charge for the service. So
Nice.
that's a nice thing for those who might not have the insurance, or because unfortunately that's one of the biggest roadblocks I
I
run
know.
into is the
I
people I
know.
work with are uninsured. And I was going to say, whenever you talked about that facility, I bet they got your insurance. So did me.
Oh, sure. They sure did. They sure did. Enough to where, yeah, it covered our deductible for the year had been paid.
I've had the same experience recently.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. It is, and it is not, oh, I could go on about that, but I'm not going to. That's something that really brings up some emotion in my belly.
It's a difficult thing finding those who genuinely care and can offer a solution versus those who are in it for profit.
I know. I mean, and in that experience of mine, I remember there, it was a whole gamut of people who were in there while I was there. But I don't know that there was one that didn't feel like they were being neglected. Um, there was only one nurse that I remember that actually treated us with respect. It was basically just a line up, take meds, go to, go get your food, and otherwise sit and watch TV. And it was just, and Jordan was in there advocating for me, going, "Well, we were told she was going to get, you know, this treatment and this care." And, they pulled me aside and we talked to someone for a minute, but that was it. And otherwise, my only other experience was this doctor saying, "You will take this medication or I will not let you go." And I was like, "But that medication doesn't sit well with me." And he didn't give a shit. He just wanted me out of his hair.
You're just being non compliant.
That's right. But I didn't want to stay past the 3 days. And I already knew I wasn't going to be able to leave early. So I took the medication and I was up all night sick. And I went back into his office the next day and I was like, I told you this is what would happen. And he said, fine. And that was the end of it. So that was my stellar care at facility not to be named, even though I'd like to. It was a place north of Tampa. That's all I'm going to say. Anywho, that could seriously, we could go down a rabbit hole on that.
No,
And
I can see that as your show progresses, as the podcast progresses, that you're kind of collecting a nice little collection of resources,
oh,
and
yeah.
I I see the value in that,
Well,
and
thank you.
don't ever hesitate to share my info.
Yeah, no, I will. For those of you listening, I will gather all the links and all the info from John, and you'll be able to find it in the show notes.
But likewise, I'll say that you are absolutely one that I've looked to lately for some direction and some of the personal things I'm dealing with family. So thank you for that.
No, thank you for mentioning that, and I am so glad that I can be there to support you. And I tell everybody, it's very hard. I was actually talking to with my trainer Danielle, and we yesterday we were having just this deep conversation about what happened in that traumatic event the year but that led up to Logan's death. And um I was like, when I get to where I'm going later, right? When I get to the other side, I feel like I'm just going to stand there and take a look back on this life and go, what the fuck? How was this my life? How did these experiences happen? Because it just, I feel like I've lived 4,000 lives in just this one lifetime, different of all of these experiences. And, I could go down the rabbit hole of the why me. And I mean, I'm starting to tear up because I'm thinking about, you know, just the shit that it's brought upon myself and our family and my marriage. And it's been difficult, yet we keep fighting and we keep fighting, and these resources keep opening up and we keep having these experiences. And that's what makes this so important to me, is that I can be there for others and I can share, because what I don't want is for people to get to a point of where I was, right? I didn't know the resources that were out there. And if I would have known, maybe Logan would still be alive. I don't know. I can't spend time, in that. So I take everything that I've learned and gone through and I want to help others. It's just because we have to help each other, right? And because the poor guy that you mentioned earlier that was standing against his department, that's not what he wanted to do, but his trauma and his nervous system had just shut down, and he didn't know of any other way because the resources were not provided to him. So, thank you for saying that, and let that be a testament to everyone listening, that we have to help each other, and nothing is going to progress, nothing is going to change unless we have this open dialogue and we're sharing these resources with each other and we're supporting each other, because you don't have to be alone. Far too many years I felt alone, and I realize now that that was my trauma. That was my trauma keeping me alone. So, I'm so very grateful for you and everything. The past almost 10 years, can you believe that?
Yeah, the same. I'm sorry for the circumstances, but I'm grateful to call you my friend.
Absolutely.
Do you remember how did we connect? Did I did I reach out to you on the internet or how?
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, back in the days of having Facebook, I believe you reached out
Okay.
through Facebook. And that would have been, gosh, I want to say maybe 2017, maybe 2018. Because it would have been 2018 because or after because you were sober.
Was I? Okay. I was going to say
That's when I learned your story. Yep.
a drunk text. I don't know.
No, 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 because you were sober at that time because you shared your story and you shared what that had done. And I've actually talked about you many, many times with people talking about the extent of the trauma, the outreaches of the trauma, because it wasn't just it wasn't just our immediate nuclear family, right? It wasn't just Jordan and Mallory and myself, right? It was the grandparents, the aunts and uncles, and his friends and teachers, and the people who were there that day. I spend a lot of time thinking about the nurse. Her name is Christy, that had, she was a nurse. I believe she was a nurse in training, but she had a defibrillator kit in her car.
Mhm.
And I remember her running back to her car to grab that. And, she was helping Logan. But I mean, how do you see a young child like that, blue, and knowing that they're deceased, right? But still working. I mean, I cannot put myself in your shoes and think about what you see. I cannot put myself in Carolyn's shoes, even if she tells me stories, and she's going to come on once I convince her to get a computer. She doesn't have a computer. Who doesn't have a computer? Carolyn, get a computer. But the stories, have you seen, oh, what is the new movie with Rainn Wilson that just came out? Code Code 3,
Yeah, yeah, that's correct.
right?
Yeah,
She made me watch that. Well, actually we watched it together and she said that's like the most realistic, paramedic movie that has ever been. And it was a I mean, I have it. I bought it on Apple so I could watch it again.
yeah.
Um and still, I mean, I've lived through what I've lived through and I still can't imagine what you guys see on a regular basis. I can't. I can't. So I commend you. And for you and everyone else out there, thank you for your service. Thank you for saving lives. Thank you for seeing what you see and for doing what you do, because you guys are true heroes. You really, truly are.
It's funny. Before I got sober, I just always imagined that the shit I saw and dealt with and carried was hopefully going to be my my ticket to heaven. That I was living a hell here, and that would be my reward. Fortunately, in sobriety, I've learned the tools to deal with things like that.
And actually, that was going to be one of my questions, as we start to wrap up. You have a hard day, you see something that's traumatic. What do you do personally? What have you learned? What are some of the tools that you've learned to be able to go home and process that and not allow it to send you into darkness or make you want to go drink?
Quite honestly, prayer, meditation. Um, I ask my higher power to help me understand. I accept that it may be beyond my understanding, and I ask that I be shown how that experience can help me to help someone else moving forward. Ultimately, for me, the best way I can go about feeling better is helping others. And it's just like a subconscious, it's like, I do what I can for others, and I don't think much about my problems.
Yeah.
It just, and sometimes it's in comparison, I realize, oh, my situation's not that bad. Glad I'm not dealing with what he is. But
Mhm.
prayer, and it's not like I sit on a yoga mat daily and meditate, but I meditate daily. I find at least 30 minutes, maybe not all at once. A lot of times it's 5 minutes here, it's 5 minutes there, where I sit alone in quiet, breathe in, out deeply about 10 times, and then I'll have a little chat with my higher power. and then I'll sit there and another 10 to 20 cycles of deep breathing in and out. And it just allows me to push away the chaos. Talk about resources. There was a book that someone recommended to me called Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics.
I like it.
And it's available as an audio book too. The guy who wrote it is like a news anchor for Good Morning America and one of the other big news agencies. But I found it very helpful. It really changed meditation for me in that it really is just taking a few minutes. Because your mind's going to take you a couple of deep breaths and you hear the noise over here and then your mind's distracted. That's all okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's just really, if you take the time to do it a couple of times throughout the day, you'd be amazed what it'll do for you. If it's not something that you're familiar with, I would suggest check out that book or the audio book.
I'll put that in the show notes too. I'll put that link in there for listeners. And it's so funny you say that because the episode that will air before yours, so actually next Monday, is with Christopher O'Reilly, who talks about mindfulness and the power of mindfulness and sitting in the quiet and the meditation. And um, so I've heard this now like repeatedly. So I feel like it's the universe poking at me, going, you need to allow yourself to even just 5 minutes, because I struggle with it. I always am thinking of things that need to be done and having to deal with little people, and it and see, that's me making excuses. So people, don't make excuses like me. Just find your way into it. You won't be sorry. So as we close up, John, is there anything else that in this episode, because I know we have plans for you to be back for a different topic. That'll be a very good one. So I'm excited for that. But is there anything else that you would like to share or that we missed that you want people to know?
No, just thank you for the opportunity to spend some time with you and to talk about some of that stuff. I'm loving the show. You're doing great things. I'm proud
Thank
of
you.
you. I'm happy to be a part of it. So thank
Thank you. None. I'm grateful. And once again, I'm so grateful for you.
like, subscribe, and share.
That's it. Like, subscribe, and share. Man, you want to come work for the podcast? You got it down. All right. Well, everyone, I thank you for sticking with us. And I hope that you found some good resources and inspiration and tools and all the things from our discussion today with John. Again, like, follow, subscribe if you if you like what you heard. If you're finding the podcast to be beneficial, we would greatly appreciate it. So until next time, thank you again, John, and we'll see you all later.
Bye.
Bye.